The Birth of Jacob's Children by Ginzberg. The ways of God are not like unto the ways of men. A man clings close to his friend while he has riches, and forsakes him when he falls into poverty. But when God sees a mortal unsteady and faltering, he reaches a hand out to him and raises him up. Thus it happened with Leah. She was hated by Jacob, and God visited her in mercy. Jacob's aversion to Leah began the very morning after their wedding, when his wife taunted him with not being wholly free from cunning and craft himself. Then God said, "Help can come to Leah only if she gives birth to a child, then the love of her husband will return to her." 168 God remembered the tears she had shed when she prayed that her doom, chaining her to that recreant Esau, be averted from her, and so wondrous are the uses of prayer that Leah, besides turning aside the impending decree, was permitted to marry Jacob before her sister, and be the first to bear him a child. There was another reason why the Lord was compassionately inclined toward Leah. She had got herself talked about. The sailors on the sea, the travellers along the highways, the women at their looms, they all gossiped about Leah, saying, "She is not within what her seeming is without. She appears to be pious, but if she were, she would not have deceived her sister." 169 To put an end to all this tattle, God granted her the distinction of bearing a son at the end of 7 months after her marriage. He was one of a pair of twins, the other child being a daughter. So it was with 11 of the sons of Jacob. All of them except Joseph were born twins with a girl, and the twin sister and brother married later on. Altogether it was an extraordinary childbirth, for Leah was barren, not formed by nature to bear children. She called her firstborn son Reuben, which means "see the normal man," for he was neither big nor little, neither dark nor fair, but exactly normal. In calling her oldest child Reuben, "see the son," Leah indicated his future character. Behold the difference, the name implied, between my firstborn son and the firstborn son of my father-in-law. Esau sold his birthright to Jacob of his own free will, and yet he hated him. As for my firstborn son, although his birthright was taken from him without his consent, and given to Joseph, it was nevertheless he who rescued Joseph from the hands of his brethren. 172. Leah called her second son Shimon, "Yonder is sin," for one of his descendants was that Zimri who was guilty of vile trespasses with the daughters of Moab. 173. The name of her third son, Levi, was given him by God himself, not by his mother. The Lord summoned him through the angel Gabriel, and bestowed the name upon him as one who is crowned, with the 24 gifts that are the tribute due to the priests. 174. At the birth of her fourth son, Leah returned thanks to God for a special reason. She knew that Jacob would beget 12 sons, and if they were distributed equally among his 4 wives, each would bear 3. But now it appeared that she had one more than her due share, and she called him Jehudah, thanks unto God. She was thus the first since the creation of the world to give thanks to God. 175, and her example was followed by David and Daniel, the descendants of her son Judah. When Rachel saw that her sister had borne Jacob 4 sons, she envied Leah, not that she begrudged her the good fortune she enjoyed, she only envied her for her piety, saying to herself that it was to her righteous conduct that she owed the blessing of many children. Then she besought Jacob, "Pray unto God for me, that he grant me children, else my life is no life." Verily there are 4 that may be regarded as though they were dead, the blind, the leper, the childless, and he who was once rich and has lost his fortune. Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, "It were better thou shouldst address thy petition to God, and not to me, for am I in God's stead, who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb?" 177 God was displeased with this answer that Jacob made to his sad wife. He rebuked him with the words, "Is it thus thou wouldst comfort a grief-stricken heart? As thou livest, the day will come when thy children will stand before the son of Rachel, and he will use the same words thou hast but now used, saying, Am I in the place of the Lord?" Rachel also made reply to Jacob, saying, "Did not thy father too entreat God for thy mother with earnest words, beseeching him to remove her barrenness?" Jacob, "It is true, but Isaac had no children, and I have several." Rachel, "Remember thy grandfather Abraham, thou canst not deny that he had children when he supplicated God in behalf of Sarah." Jacob, "Wouldst thou do for me what Sarah did for my grandfather?" Rachel, "Pray, what did she?" Jacob, "She herself brought a rival into her house." Rachel, "If that is all that is necessary, I am ready to follow the example of Sarah, and I pray that as she was granted a child for having invited a rival, so may I be blessed too." 178 Thereupon Rachel gave Jacob Bilhah, her freed handmaid, to wife, and she bore him a son whom Rachel called Dan, saying, "As the Lord was gracious unto me, and gave me a son according to my petition, so he will permit Samson, the descendant of Dan, to judge his people, that it fall not into the hands of the Philistines. 179 Bilhah's second son Rachel named Naphtali, saying, Mine is the bond that binds Jacob to this place, for it was for my sake that he came to Laban. At the same time she wanted to convey by this name that the Torah, which is as sweet as Nophet, honeycomb, would be taught in the territory of Naphtali. And the name had still a third meaning. As God hath heard my fervent prayer for a son, so he will hearken unto the fervent prayer of the Naphtalites when they are beset by their enemies. 181. Leah, seeing that she had left bearing, while Bilhah, her sister's handmaid, bore Jacob 2 sons, concluded that it was Jacob's destiny to have 4 wives, her sister and herself, and their half-sisters Bilhah and Zilpah. Therefore she also gave him her handmaid to wife. Zilpah was the youngest of the 4 women. It was the custom of that time to give the older daughter the older handmaid, and the younger daughter the younger handmaid as their dowry when they got married. Now, in order to make Jacob believe that his wife was the younger daughter he had served for, Laban had given Leah the younger handmaid as her marriage portion. This Zilpah was so young that her body betrayed no outward signs of pregnancy, and nothing was known of her condition until her son was born. Leah called the boy Gad, which means fortune, or it may mean the cutter, for from Gad was descended the prophet Elijah, who brings good fortune to Israel, and he also cuts down the heathen world. 183 Leah had other reasons too, for choosing this name of double meaning. The tribe of Gad had the good fortune of entering into possession of its allotment in the Holy Land before any of the others. 184, and also, Gad the son of Jacob was born circumcised. 185. To Zilpah's second son Leah gave the name of Asher, praise, for she said, Unto me all manner of praise is due, for I brought my handmaid into the house of my husband as wife. Sarah did likewise, but only because she had no children, and so it was also with Rachel. But as for me, I had children, and nevertheless I subdued my passion, and without jealousy I gave my handmaid to my husband for wife. Verily all will praise and extol me. Furthermore she spoke, As the women will praise me, so the sons of Asher will in time to come praise God for their fruitful possession in the Holy Land. The next son born unto Jacob was Issachar, a reward, and once more it was Leah who was permitted to bring forth the child, as a reward from God for her pious desire to have the 12 tribes come into the world. To secure this result, she left no means untried. 188. It happened once that her oldest son Reuben was tending his father's ass during the harvest, and he bound him to a root of dudame, and went his way. On returning, he found the dudame torn out of the ground, and the ass lying dead beside it. The beast had uprooted it in trying to get loose, and the plant has a peculiar quality. Whoever tears it up must die. 189 As it was the time of the harvest, when it is permitted for anyone to take a plant from a field, and as dudame is, besides, a plant which the owner of a field esteems lightly, Reuben carried it home. Being a good son, he did not keep it for himself but gave it to his mother. Rachel desired the dudame, and she asked the plant of Leah, who parted with it to her sister, but on the condition that Jacob, when he returned from work in the evening, should tarry with her for a while. It was altogether unbecoming conduct in Rachel to dispose thus of her husband. She gained the dudame, but she lost 2 tribes. If she had acted otherwise, she would have borne 4 sons instead of 2. And she suffered another punishment. Her body was not permitted to rest in the grave beside her husband's. Jacob came home from the field after night had fallen, for he observed the law obliging a day labourer to work until darkness sets in, and Jacob's zeal in the affairs of Laban was as great in the last 7 years, after his marriage, as in the first 7, while he was serving for the hand of Rachel. When Leah heard the braying of Jacob's ass, she ran to meet her husband. 191, and without giving him time to wash his feet, she insisted upon his turning aside into her tent. At first Jacob refused to go, but God compelled him to enter, for unto God it was known that Leah acted from pure disinterested motives. 193 Her dudame secured 2 sons for her, Issachar, the father of the tribe that devotes itself to the study of the Torah, whence his name meaning reward, and Zebulun, whose descendants carried on commerce, using their profits to enable their brethren of Issachar to keep at their studies. Leah called this last-born son of her Zebulun, dwelling place, for she said, Now will my husband dwell with me, seeing that I have borne him 6 sons, and also the sons of Zebulun will have a goodly dwelling place in the Holy Land. 195. Leah bore once more, and this last time it was a daughter, a man-child turned into a woman by her prayer. When she conceived for the 7th time she spake as follows, God promised Jacob 12 sons, I bore him 6, and each of the 2 handmaids has borne him 2. If now I were to bring forth another son, my sister Rachel would not be equal even unto the handmaids. Therefore she prayed to God to change the male embryo in her womb into a female, and God hearkened unto her prayer. 196. Now all the wives of Jacob, Leah, Rachel, Zilpah, and Bilhah, united their prayers with the prayer of Jacob, and together they besought God to remove the curse of barrenness from Rachel. On New Year's Day, the day whereon God sits in judgment upon the inhabitants of the earth, he remembered Rachel and granted her a son. And Rachel spake, God hath taken away my reproach, for all the people had said that she was not a pious woman, else had she borne children, and now that God had hearkened to her, and opened her womb, such idle talk no longer had any reason. 198. By bearing a son, she had escaped another disgrace. She had said to herself, Jacob hath a mind to return to the land of his birth, and my father will not be able to hinder his daughters who have borne him children from following their husband thither with their children. But he will not let me, the childless wife, go too, and he will keep me here and marry me to one of the uncircumcised. She said furthermore, As my son hath removed my reproach, so Joshua his descendant will roll away a reproach from the Israelites, when he circumcises them beyond Jordan. Rachel called her son Joseph, increased, saying, God will give me an additional son. Prophetess as she was, she foresaw she would have a second son, but an increase added on by God is larger than the original capital itself. Benjamin, the second son, whom Rachel regarded merely as a supplement, had 10 sons, while Joseph begot only 2. These 12 together may be considered the 12 tribes borne by Rachel. Had Rachel not used the form of expression, the Lord add to me another son, she herself would have begotten 12 tribes with Jacob. 202.